So how many people I want to, Patriot, the movie Patriot, Mel Gibson? Any Mel Gibson fans? You know, right? My mom, I remember, had a huge crush on Mel Gibson. It was embarrassing. Lethal Weapon, it was, yeah. She was like, oh, okay, we can watch that action movie. Yeah, I'll just leave that there. My mom's actually going to be out here next month, so I got to be careful what I say. So this is new. I'm going to try not to blind myself going, can you really notice? You can't really notice, right? Okay, so I'm going to try not to blind myself walking back and forth because sometimes I get excited. And today we're talking about Mel Gibson, so I might get excited. I made some of the best movies ever. We got Braveheart. We got Patriot, Lethal Weapon. I mean, Mel Gibson is kind of a rock star. We're not going to talk about his moral, spiritual views. Bless you, by the way. You're welcome. That's my job. So, The Patriot. How many people have seen it? Let me see your hands. Okay, I asked my RP. I don't know if you can hear me, RP, but I asked my RP, you've seen Patriot, right? I got this analogy, and we need to know that you've seen Patriot. If you haven't seen Patriot, fix yourself, okay? After church, just go fix yourself. You need to see that movie. It's amazing. It is rated R because of really, really, really awesome is what that R stands for. So, anyways, in that movie, he tells his kids, right? He's got the boys, and you remember the Redcoats during the Revolutionary War. The Redcoats come, long story short, they kill one of his boys. And he goes out to carry out justice, not revenge, because vengeance belongs to the Lord. So he's going to seek justice against this redcoat. And as he's running up to flank this column of British soldiers, he tells his boys, he's crouching behind the log, and he says, aim small, miss small. Remember, boys, aim small, miss small. What is he saying there? What is he saying there? I mean, it's a great shooting principle in general. You know, aim small, miss small. If the target is 12 inches, a 12-inch circle, I'm going to aim for the tiniest little, the front side post tip right in the center mass of that 12-inch circle. I'm not just going to aim for the black circle. That's the principle of shooting an aim small, miss small. So in the heat of battle, he tells his little boys who are nervous, they're afraid, their adrenaline is charged, they've just run to catch up to this column of troops, so now they're going to have to sit and control their breathing. Something about bone support, muscle relaxation, natural point of aim, natural respiratory pause, all this stuff ringing a bell. So he tells them, remember, aim small, miss small. So we could have titled this message, Just Stop Sinning and Follow the Rules All the Time. But I really like this title, and I think it's a little bit more catchy. Aim small, miss small. What are we talking about with that? I'll start off with this verse that I think I have in your notes for our introduction, 1 Peter 1, 15 through 16. It says this, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all of your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. So God calls us to bullseye. He calls us to perfect holiness. No pressure, right? So every decision, this is how this works, every decision that we make is trending us towards something. It's either holiness, bullseye, nailed it, or not. So every decision we make is the round that you're firing, and the target is God's standard of perfect holiness. This is a big deal. This is a big deal, and that's what we're talking about today. So think about it like this. Every decision that I make, if I just try to fire that decision down at the target of just kind of generally being a nice guy, I'll probably get somewhere down there on the target. I'm just going to kind of be a nice guy. So I'm going to avoid killing people. That's really bad. I'm going to avoid murdering people. I'm going to avoid stealing stuff. I don't want to be a thief. I'll try to avoid lying even. I'll even try to be an honest kind of guy. But that's not really center mass. Center mass on that target is Jesus Christ in perfect holiness. That is a tall order, and that should kind of start to make you already feel like, oh dear. So how are you doing on that? By the way, don't raise your hands or anything, but how are you doing on that? On hitting the bullseye of God's standard of perfect holiness. He said, be holy. It's not a suggestion. This is what we're commanded to do. To be holy because He's holy. You know, in Corinthians it talks about any man in Christ is a new creation. The old has passed away. The new has come. So God doesn't call us to just be a better version of ourselves. To be nice guys and nice little girls. He doesn't call us to that. He calls us to be absolutely 100% transformed, new. Again, that's a tall order, but this is what God is calling us to do. And I have a little bit of a soapbox about that because I grew up Christian. I grew up in a Christian home, Christian church. I remember getting saved when I was 6. I remember getting baptized shortly thereafter. And by childlike faith, I was saved. I believed Jesus died on the cross for my sins. I was trusting him as my Lord and Savior. But then after that, I was making decisions, just kind of throwing rounds down range. Maybe I'll hit the target if I get lucky. But I was missing the whole point that God doesn't call us to just be nice. And what little boy going through puberty wants to just be nice, to wear khakis and a polo shirt and comb your hair and say things like golly gosh and gee whiz? Nobody wants that. For little boys growing up, you want to be the tough guy on the block. You want to be the guy that's popular in school, and you know what I'm saying? We're not appealed to by the idea of being nice guys and girls. But what does appeal to me is that God's called me to join forces with the Almighty in an epic spiritual warfare for the souls of men. Yeah, I get excited about that. But to do that, we're being transformed into his image and likeness, because we can't just wing this. This is a big deal. This is eternal consequence. This is the souls of men we're talking about. And to be a part of this kind of spiritual warfare, you got to aim small, miss small, because you're going to be all over the place. Your adrenaline's going to be going. You're going to be afraid. You're going to be anxious, and you're going to miss the mark. So we're going to look at Saul today and how we can gain some principles from how he he made some compromises early on. He never really recovered from it. But I think there's some application for us in that. So look at you, if you would, in 1 Samuel chapter 9, we'll actually start off in. And I'm going to kind of walk you through, in short order, the first several years of Saul's reign, because I think there's some very valuable principles we can see there. We're going to start off with his humble beginnings. His humble beginnings. I'm going to read to you from 1 Samuel chapter 9. It's kind of after Judges, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and then we pick up Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 9. In verse 21, it says this. We got right now the prophet Samuel. Up to this point, Israel has not had a king before. They've kind of been a theocracy with God as the king. And they've had judges coming throughout. This is where you get the stories of Samson and Deborah and these Old Testament judges that would come and help Israel to kind of guide back towards God, their king. So as we pick up with Samuel, he's kind of that last era of prophets and judges that's leading and guiding Israel to be in line with God. So he's come, God's chosen Saul to be the king and told Samuel to go and anoint him. Samuel seeks out Saul and tells him, hey, buddy, you're going to be the king. And in verse 21 of chapter 9, we see Saul's response. So Saul answers, am I not a Benjaminite, the least of the tribe of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way? Because Samuel comes to him at a dinner party and says, hey, buddy, I just want you to know you're going to be king of Israel. There's never been a king in Israel, but that's going to be you. And when I was actually thinking about Chad when I was getting ready for this sermon, Chad, can you just stand up for a second? We need a visual aid right now. So it says that Saul stood head and shoulders above every other man. So he's kind of like Chad. Thank you. It's really embarrassing. Really embarrassing. And he doesn't wear glasses. Gee whiz. So this was even Saul's response, though. Saul says, "What? I'm just the least of the tribe of Israel, and of that tribe, I'm the least of all those clans. So why are you telling me that I'm going to be king?" And if you've ever studied the story of Saul, that doesn't stay that way. But he starts off so humble, so humble. In verse 9 of chapter 10, it actually talks about God giving him a new heart after he's anointed by Samuel to be king. God gives him a new heart. We see that in verse 22. That's kind of one of the more popular stories that you'll hear about Saul, is when they made this big, huge public announcement. They get all the nation of Israel together, and they bring Chad up, and they say, you're going to be king of Israel. Saul. Bring up Saul. You're going to be king of all Israel. That's what they're going to do. And this big announcement that they were going to make to all the people to let them know there's going to be a king. Where was Saul? It says he was actually hiding in the baggage. And they all make this trip to come here for this announcement. And it says in verse 22, they inquired again of the Lord, hey, we've cast the lots. We know who it's going to be. But where is he? Is there still somebody else that we're supposed to be waiting for, Lord? What's going on? The Lord says, behold, he's hidden himself among the baggage in verse 22. So some of the people actually, even when they say, Saul, you're nobody, they're talking trash. Who are you to be king? Even then, he doesn't like, well, God anointed me. I don't know if you noticed, but the prophet kind of poured the oil. It's official. I don't know if you heard the announcement. It says he just kind of keeps his peace. So all this is saying that Saul had humble beginnings. He started off humble, and I think he had kind of a reverence in those early years. He kind of had an early on reverence that, God's called me to do something. The prophet of God, the man of God, everybody knew Samuel. He was a big deal. And God has called me and anointed me to be king of his chosen people. This is a tall order, and he's freaking out a little bit. So I can kind of relate to that. True story. Okay? Confidentiality with the chap. Don't tell anybody. I don't know if that works that way, but so there I was. I got on the Marine Corps. And the first time I led a Bible study, I was in the Marine Corps. We were on my first deployment in 2002, and we're on a ship in the middle of nowhere. We started reading the Bible and started getting a group of guys from the platoon together, and we're doing Bible studies. It was cool. I didn't even think about it. I grew up Christian, so just we get around and we do a little Bible study. No big deal. It was my boys, my buddies. It was no pressure. But for some reason, when I got out of the Marine Corps and got hired as a pastoral intern at a church in Southern California, now all of a sudden I have a title. Now all of a sudden I'm a minister. And now all of a sudden there's some pressure for me to actually know something about the Word. Nothing had really changed. I mean, it was just a title. But with that title came great responsibility. So there I was teaching my first Bible study. Announced it, promoted it, flyers. We didn't have the cool business cards because this is next level here at Marine Memorial Chapel. But there I was in the house. I was renting a house with a couple buddies in college. And we're going to do a Bible study, small group in our house. And it's the first time that the intern, Stephen, is going to be doing this. Big deal. A lot of pressure. So people are starting to show up. I'm freaking out. I've studied for hours. I know what I'm going to say. It was probably even a pretty simple message. I don't even remember it. But I remember I was ready, except I was so nervous. So I hear people starting to show up. And Julie was actually there, and she was actually going to get the door. And so I actually went out the back door, out the patio, around the side of the house, and puked. Don't tell anybody. It was bad. It was embarrassing. I'm out there throwing up for Bible study. Okay? Fine in Iraq, convoys up to Baghdad, no problem. Mark 19, 50 cal, sitting in a turret. And that was before up armor. You're just hanging out up there with your little flak jacket on, bulletproof, right? No problem. No problem. Calm, smooth, collected. I dare you. Go ahead. But Bible study, now I'm throwing up outside. It was embarrassing. So Julie comes out there, you okay? I'm like, oh yeah, something I ate, carne asada burrito. I don't know what it was. It's just crazy. I'll be right in, So I go back inside and everybody's like, are you okay? I'm like, oh yeah, it's totally the stomach thing going around. You heard about that? Oh, you didn't hear about it? Yeah, I guess I'm the only one with it. But anyways, and I didn't admit for years after that, and only to Julie even then, that it was my nerves, that I was actually so nervous I got sick. And so I think I can relate to Saul a little bit. I'm doing that because I actually looked right at the light earlier and it kind of hurts. It's like looking at the sun. So second, his success, his initial success. He started off great. Verse 26 of chapter 11. I'll read you this verse. There is no verse 26. What are you talking about in chapter 11? Wait for it. Okay. So here's what's going on. He has his first opportunity to do combat. He hasn't even been gone through the coronation day yet, and this is what happens. There is a tribe of Israel under attack. So the Ammonites are attacking this tribe, and this is what they say to him. We'll make a treaty with you on one condition in verse 2 of chapter 11. It says, Nahash the Ammonite said to them, on this condition I will make a treaty with you that I gouge out all of your right eyes and thus bring disgrace on all Israel. Now would you surrender under those terms? I would not. Yeah, we'll let you surrender. We'll let you, tuck your tail between your legs and come out of your city, come out of your fortifications. We'll do a treaty with you if you gouge out one of your eyes. Everybody. Your little girls, your little boys, your wife, go ahead and gouge out their eyes too. I don't think so. I'm probably not going to answer those terms. So this is what they say. Let us get the word out, see if anybody comes to help us, and if they don't, we'll answer those terms. So they put the word out. Saul gets the word, and he says, not on my watch. And it says the Spirit of God actually comes upon him. He gets angry, a righteous indignation. He gets all of Israel to join forces and fight as one, and they have a huge victory against the Ammonites. Destroy them all. Awesome, epic day for Saul. So he starts out with this huge victory, and even in verse 12 and 13, this is the level of the victory. It says in verse 12, the people said to Samuel, the prophet, "Who is it that said, 'Shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death.'" So those guys that were talking trash saying that Saul shouldn't be king, let's kill them all. But Saul said, no, no man shall be put to death this day, for the Lord has worked salvation in Israel. God has done something amazing, guys. Let's just let those ones go. God's done an epic thing in Israel today. So I see Saul having this initial success. He's still humble. It looks like he's having a great start. And by the way, don't we do that sometimes? We have great starts. I think about when you first start college, you got your syllabus and your little 3-ring binder, and you're all, gee golly whiz, in the front row of school, and I'm ready to learn, teacher. And then like halfway through the semester, you're kind of overwhelmed, you're swamped, you're forgetting tests, and you're skipping classes, and maybe that was just me in college, but you start off really great in the Marine Corps. Your first year, they have words for that, like you're a motivator, and well, there's other words that are less appropriate for church, but there's words for those guys that they come in their first year and they're super motivated, they're squared away, great military bearing. I'll tell you another secret. My first year in the Marine Corps, I would kind of like secretly iron my camis, back when we used to iron our camis, and I had like a hidden bottle of starch that I would keep in the barracks, and I'd laugh and joke with all the guys about, the Marine Corps is dumb, the Marine Corps is lame, yeah, I wish they would just shut up and let us do our own thing, and I'd go and like, my creases are going to be so sharp, you're going to be able to cut your finger on them. And I would come to work, like my boots were ridiculous. I put the edge dressing, like I was that guy, like on my whole boot to make them shine. And like people would walk down the street and the sun would hit them in the eye. I'm like, squared away. That's right. But that tends to fade over time, doesn't it? It tends to fade a little bit over time. I mean, I think about my marriage. My first year of my marriage, there's flowers surprising at work, and there's coming home early with roses and all kinds of random gifts just because we're in love. But like year 8 that we're in now, and some of you guys have been married probably a little bit longer than that, might say, yeah. Sorry to call you guys out like that, but yeah, I think you guys get the idea that we have a great start, and there's this initial intentionality of aiming small. I'm gonna nail that thing right in the middle. We start off our relationship with God this way. I'm just gonna do, and maybe you hear a good sermon. Not here, but you probably sometime in your life maybe heard a good sermon. And it does something to you, and you get back on track, and you zero in your sights, and you're ready to go. You're ready to make right decisions, but then over time, it just kind of wears away, and this is unfortunately where we see Saul going. So we see him missing the target. Missing the target. The first time, by the way, that's the definition of sin, right? Hamartiology, the study of missing the target, is the doctrine of sin, is how you miss the target, missing the mark. So this is what Saul starts to do, and the first time it's simply because of fear, which we can't really relate to, right? We never compromise our convictions because of fear. We don't really know how it's going to work out, so we just wing it, fire around downrange, completely off. But this is what Saul does. In chapter 13, we're going to pick up, and I'll give it to him. He was in kind of a tight spot. In chapter 13, it says that he's gathered together with himself 3,000 men. He's got 2,000 with him, 1,000 with his son Jonathan. He's got 3,000 men. The enemy has 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and it says there were innumerable soldiers, innumerable foot soldiers, like the sand of the seashore. And then it goes on to say that, by the way, the only people that had swords were Jonathan and David, because the Philistines had been oppressing them so much they didn't allow them to have any blacksmiths or any weapons. So the only people out of those 3,000 against the 30,000, the 6,000, and by the way, we can't even count how many foot soldiers there are. So they were in a tight spot. I'll give it to him. So he lets fear kind of rule the day, and this is what he does, because he was told to go there and wait for 7 days, and Samuel's going to come. He's going to make a sacrifice, and then you'll know that God is there in your camp, and God will give you the victory, is what he was supposed to do. So in chapter 13, verses 6 and 7, we'll pick up. It says, when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, that the people were hard-pressed. It was a hard spot. The people hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns. This is embarrassing. This is the army. And some Hebrews, not the Marine Corps, this is the army. And some Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. This is a bad spot. You know it's bad when your people are running and ducking and hiding in caves and cisterns and trying to swim across the river to get out of the stinking country. So again, I'm kind of curious, where do you run when you're overwhelmed? You know, in the Marine Corps, we say we don't retreat, we attack from a different angle. I love that. The first time I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But in our lives, don't we do this? When we get overwhelmed, we see the odds stacked against us. You know, where do you run to when you're afraid? Maybe you just, try to turn on entertainment and just block it out, just ignore it. Maybe it'll go away. Maybe you turn to alcohol. Maybe you turn to, distraction in another format. Maybe you just ignore the problem and maybe it'll just magically go away. So don't be too hard on Saul when we think about where do we run when we're under the gun like this. So he's fearful and he lets fear and doubt get the best of him. And he compromises in verse 8 and 9. It says he waited 7 days. That was the time appointed by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal. And the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, hurry, hurry, bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it goes on to say that as soon as he did it, no sooner did the smoke start to rise from the altar as Samuel shows up. He's like, buddy, what's going on? And of course, Saul goes on to try to justify it and say, hey, you weren't here when you said you were going to be here, and look at, the guys you're leaving, and I had to do it. I just had to. Don't we say that? We try to make excuses for ourselves. We justify, I just, because of the situation, the circumstances, just overwhelmed, and so I had to do it. He justifies his sin. I'll tell you another story. It's all Julie's fault. All Julie's fault. So this is what happened. She's down at children's church like 39 weeks pregnant. I'm such a horrible husband. So anyways, it was her fault though. So I had just gotten back from war, just gotten back from deployment, and we had just had our kid. So she's, I think Tirza was like 2 months old. I'm just learning how to be a dad because I got back right after her birthday. So I'm driving Tirza to the store, and Julie's told me in my first week back, hey, there's this little side street you can take, and it's an awesome side street because it cuts off this really annoying intersection with like a 5-minute light. You just take this little side street and no problem, miss the intersection, and voila, you get home in a couple minutes. So I'm thinking, that's a pretty good deal. So I take Tirza to the store, and I've been back from deployment a couple weeks now, and I take the side street. And as soon as I turn on this little side street, guess who's waiting for me? The fuzz, the 5-0. The popo, the police. They're waiting for me. And the guy just, he's waving me over along with everybody else that did the same thing as me. He's just waving me over. I'm like, great, what is this? So I pull over, and he comes up to the car. I'm like, what's the problem, officer? Like we always ask when we're innocent, right? What's the problem, officer? And he's like, this is not a through street. I'm like, as a matter of fact, I did not know that. I actually just got back from war, protecting freedom and democracy around the world. I don't know if you noticed, I got my brand new baby that I missed her birth, but she's here, or I missed her first birthday, but she's here now with me, and I'm just trying to do the right thing. So he's like, you saw the sign, right? I'm like, what? I saw the sign, like after I turned. He's like, so this is your first time down the street? Well, no, I mean, not exactly, but, so I started the backpedaling thing. He's like, yeah, you're going to get a ticket. So long story short, I go to court, and I'm thinking, I got a pretty good case. You couldn't really see the sign. There was the hedges. So I got my satellite images, my Google Earth map. I got my sob story of I just was around the world defending freedom and democracy. And I'm standing in front of the judge thinking, this thing is in the bag. I got this. And I was the first one to go. I told all the other people that had gotten pulled over for the same thing, and they bring you all together. I told them, let me go first. I got this. Once they hear my story, they're just going to let this whole thing go. Okay? So I get up there, and again, long story short, I embarrassed myself in court and made my story, and the judge goes, yeah, regardless of your circumstances, you are guilty. Even though it's your wife's fault, you're still guilty. That sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. So Saul misses the target. He compromises. And don't we tend to do that? When we're afraid, we tend to justify our stories as well. So the second time he compromises, it's because of pride. So the first time, he was so afraid that he decided he would take the place of the prophet and make these sacrifices in his place because he was afraid. But God continues to give him success. He gets the victory, and now it's pride. So in his second test, his second opportunity to make a right choice, in chapter 15, this is what was going on. There was a group of people who had denied Israel help as they were fleeing from Egypt in the Exodus, like 400 years ago. But God didn't forget. God said, now's the time. And this is one of those, no kidding, Old Testament stories of, go in and kill every living thing. This is the order that Saul got. Go in and wipe them out because they denied aid to my people when they were on the lam from Egypt. Saul, you get the honor and the privilege of executing my justice against these people. I want you to go in, wipe them off the face of the earth. They've been weighed, measured, found guilty. Judgment day is what's happening. So Saul goes in. He fights him, and he has a huge victory. But in verses 6 and 7 of chapter 15, this is what happens. I'm sorry, verse 9. It says, "But Saul and the people spared Agag, who's the king, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fattened calves, and of the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. All that was despised and worthless, they devoted to destruction." So God gives a very clear, direct order. Here's your target: holiness, righteousness, judgment. I want you to kill them all. I want you to lay everything to waste, leave nothing breathing. So Saul says, okay, I'm going to just filter that through my interpretation, and I'm just going to save the best. Everything that's kind of lame, you got the crippled little calf kind of limping around, we'll kill them because they're kind of worthless. But all the good stuff, I'm going to save for myself and for the people. And the king, we're just going to kind of have him as a war trophy. So this is what Saul does. He misses the mark. So again, right about this time, Samuel shows up, his accountability partner, and says, what's going on, buddy? And Saul at first says, yay, everything's awesome. Verse 12, it says that Samuel was rising up early to meet him, but Saul was out there. He built a monument. Saul had set up a monument for himself in verse 12 to commemorate his victory, commemorate himself. So we see this huge issue of pride in his second fall. So he sets up this little victory monument. In verse 13, Samuel comes to Saul, and Saul says to him, "Blessed are you to the Lord. I've performed the commandment of the Lord." And Samuel says, "Why then is the bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen that I hear?" So at first, his accountability comes up to him, "How's it going?" And Saul says, "Hey, buddy, everything's great. I'm just obeying the Lord, just doing my thing. I don't know if you noticed, but we just had this awesome victory." And Samuel says, "Why do I hear all these cow? Why do I hear all these sheep? What's going on here?" He hasn't even found out that the king of these people is still alive. So this is what happens. In verses 13 and 15. Again, we see, we just read, verse 20 and 21. We see this pride of Saul, causing him to miss the mark. Verse 20. Saul says to Samuel, I highlighted all the I's in my Bible here. There's 4 of them. "I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission in which the Lord has sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction." But the people, they took the spoil, the sheep, the oxen, and the best of the things and devoted them to destruction, or the rest of the things, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. So he says the people are the ones that took all this stuff. I was the one that just accomplished the mission, did a great job, but it was the people who kind of kept the stuff. We did it for them. So not only is he full of pride himself, erecting this monument to himself, but now he's kind of shifting the blame too. So Saul never really recovers from this. You might think it's just one decision. He kept the sheep. He kept the ox. They were hungry. They just fought a war. Come on. He kept the king, little war trophy. What's the big deal? The big deal is that God calls us to the bullseye. Every decision is forming us into something. It's conforming us either into the image of Christ or not. There's no kind of near miss here. And so Saul misses the target. The consequence of compromise. Give me about 7 minutes. We're going to wrap up. Consequence of compromise. So God desires obedience rather than sacrifice is the lesson that Samuel gives in verse 22 of chapter 15. Samuel says, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination or witchcraft, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." That's a big deal. But here's the thing that Samuel is saying. God desires obedience. Not because he wants you to just be good little boys and girls, but it's because of what obedience says about your heart. So Saul has demonstrated that his heart is not for God. He demonstrated when he said, yeah, they're going to get all these sacrifices together for the Lord your God. So why are you tripping over here, prophet? They're going to sacrifice to your God. It's going to be fine. So we see Saul's heart has shifted away. It wasn't just the matter of fact that he kept sheep and goats alive. That wasn't the deal. It was that his disobedience betrayed his heart. And that's what Samuel is saying, is that God is more interested in your obedience than in the sacrifice. The sacrifice is just this thing that is really showing what's in your heart. And that was the real issue, is that with that decision, he missed the mark. He's showing that his heart was not for God, it was for self. And that's the big deal, is that God is after our heart, not just after the stuff, not just after the sacrifice, the sheep, the goat. Yeah, you gave him to church, that's great. But he's interested in your heart. That's the big deal. We can't miss out on that. For Saul, his consequence for that compromise that he made was that he lost his kingdom. It's pretty heavy. It's higher accountability for that level of leadership and responsibility. No room for error at that level. But for us, what do we miss out on? What do we sacrifice when we compromise just a little bit? I think one of the easiest ways that we compromise, and I'll just say I compromise, because I'll let you decide that with you and the Lord, but one of the easiest ways I compromise is with what I watch on TV. I kind of, tongue-in-cheek, half joking, say, about the movie Patriot, rated R, but with what we watch on TV, there's so much garbage. And if you remember when you were a little kid, and you watch a movie at your buddy's house, and it's awesome. You love this movie. I think of Ghostbusters. It was a little back in the day. So I watched Ghostbusters with my buddy. I'm thinking, this is awesome. This movie is awesome. So it comes on TV when I'm at home. This is when you had like 4 channels on the end with the big rabbit ears. So it comes on TV, which is even the edited version. But I watched it with my parents, and based on my recommendation as a 10-year-old boy, they let us watch Ghostbusters in the house. And I remember at some of the parts, and Ghostbusters, we would say now is like Ghostbusters, really? That was a bad deal? But I was watching it with mom and dad now, and so every little thing, every low-cut dress of the female actress, or every PG-13 curse word, or every time one of the demons pops out and it's really scary and kind of evil, I was thinking, this is not as awesome as I thought, because now mom and dad are sitting right next to me. Yeah, and it's kind of awkward, and during there's some romantic scenes, even in Ghostbusters. But you guys get that idea? When we're kind of doing it on our lonesome, we think, it's just a little thing. It's just a little bit of dirt in my water. It's just a little bit of mud. It's just a little bit of dirt on me. It's not a big deal. What areas do you compromise in your life? Because you think, I'll just be a nice guy. I'm not killing anybody. I'm not stealing stuff. I'm not even lying like all those people. I'm actually a pretty decent human being. But then you sit and you do the exact same thing with Jesus next to you. It looks a little different, right? Would you watch that? Would you do that? Would you say that with Jesus right next to you? It's so hard to imagine, but omnipresence, you know how that works? He's there. Like all the time, God is there. He's recording everything that I'm doing and saying all the time. I just forget about it because I can't see him. Or maybe I don't forget about it. Maybe I just say, I'll just miss a little bit. I'll just compromise a smidge, and that's okay. But I think we give up so much. I think the cost is so great when we compromise our convictions, when we compromise on holiness. With each decision that we make, we're trending towards something, for better or for worse. And this is what I didn't realize in my teenage years. And you guys who are young, it's one of those times where the preacher's going to say something and hopefully you hear it. Because when I was sitting where you're sitting, I didn't hear it. I see the teenagers out there, and I'm thinking, don't compromise. Because you might think like I did, I'm only 16, I'm only 18. So I can do this thing now, and it won't be a big deal. I can do this thing now, and thank God there's grace. I can raise my hands in church next week and get it right. I can fix that. This is preaching now. You cannot afford to compromise one little decision. Because with each decision, your character is forming into something. And it's either into the image of Christ, so that you can be joined with the Almighty in this epic spiritual journey, or you fill in the blank. What are you becoming? I love that quote from Mother Teresa. She said, be concerned with who you're becoming, not what you're doing. So we get wrapped up in, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to follow the rules. It's really who you're becoming. Be concerned with who you're becoming, who you're becoming. What are some next steps for us? What are the next steps for us? I love this idea of aim small, miss small. I had to explain it to Julie for like an hour, and I almost threw the whole thing out because she wasn't getting it, and she's seen Patriot. So hopefully you get that the idea is that we are shooting for holiness. The point is not so that we can be good little boys and girls and be a bunch of rule followers. Oh, I just resist that with everything in my being. That every personality profile test that I said says, stay away from the military. You will be horrible at it. But as a Christian, I need that structure. I need that discipline. I need that kind of external discipline that's going to help me aim small, miss small. Here's the target. Yes, everybody else could be all over the place, but here's what Jesus called me to, is to be holy, like he's holy. We do that by focusing on him, by knowing his heart, by knowing his will. This is the classic WWJD, people. What would Jesus do? I'm focusing on him so that I don't miss the mark. And I'm not going to compromise in one little thing. I'm going to get those things out of the way that are blocking my target, those fears, those circumstances, my pride, my selfishness, my greed. I'm getting that out of the way so I can focus into that tiny, tiny center of bullseye, of God's standard. What does he say I should do? Not what does the world say, isn't a nice guy, do that, and you're a pretty good person. What does God say I should be doing? Secondly, have a spotter. Everybody knows this. Every sniper in here knows this. You can't be a sniper without a spotter. If you're serious about hitting center mass, you need a spotter. Every sniper movie says that, right? He's the guy that always dies, the spotter, right? We got to watch some movies together. We're going to get the edited versions. You can buy those now. You got to have a spotter. This is that person that you can trust to say, hey, I'm having a hard time. Can you help me out? Can you help me make some sight adjustments? Can you help me make some course corrections? Can you point out my blind spots where, maybe I'm just missing something that's actually blocking the view? Can you help me make better shots? Can you help me make better decisions? It could be mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin. It might even be somebody in this room, an accountability partner, or a small group, a life group where people are doing life together in checks and balances. And, hey, I see the decisions you're making. You're kind of trending in a direction you might not want to go, buddy. I'm just going to be your spotter right now. And lastly, I want to read to you Matthew 19. And I left a blank for you. Just write that passage in there, or write the reference in there, because it's just so good. In the context of eternal life, they're having this conversation. This is the context of the rich young ruler. Jesus is saying, hey, you're doing a good job following the rules, but I want you to go and sell everything and come and follow me. He was after the heart. And this guy was a rule follower, but his heart wasn't there. So he said, I want you to do one more thing. Hit the bullseye here. And the guy couldn't do it. So then his disciples ask, who can be saved? This is impossible. Who could even be saved, Jesus? This kind of standard, who could possibly hit that? In verse 26, I love these words of freedom. When Jesus says, he looks at them intently, it says, with man this is impossible. If he stopped there, wouldn't that suck? I'm sorry I said suck in church. Wouldn't that, my dad always gets me in that. Wouldn't that be terrible if it just ended there? Hey, with man, it's impossible. And then he just dropped the mic and walked off onto the Sea of Galilee. Like, good luck with that. Figure that out. With man, it is impossible. But there's a second part of the verse. He says, with God, all things are possible. How can we be saved, Jesus? How can we possibly hit that bullseye every time? It's impossible. Yep. Sure is. But with God, all things are possible. That's why everybody knows the verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I don't know where you guys are at this morning. I don't know how you're doing, where your walk is. I'm not following you. I don't have you on closed-circuit television, watching your every move, seeing those decisions, taking notes on how you're messing up so I can be your shot spotter, keep you accountable. I'm not doing that for all of you in here. Some of you I am. But Chad's kind of more like. But I'm telling you, with God, all things are possible. And again, I don't know where you're at, but I hope that you're encouraged by the fact that God is not after your good works. He's really not. If you hear nothing else in church, he's not about you being a good little boy and a good little girl. He doesn't need that. He needs your heart. He wants your passion, your love. He wants your heart. Your decisions are merely just coming out of that. They're just an overflow of that. Right? Actions speak louder than words. Faith without works is dead. That's what the works do. They show God your love. Show you your love, really. And with you, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. Even this guy could be standing up here as a chaplain. When 12 years ago, 15 years, 16 years ago, not so much. Never would have thought. Every decision that we make is going to draw us either closer to him or further away from him. Guys, this is a fight. There's an old hymn, old spiritual, the fight is on, O Christian soldier, and face to face in stern array. Anyways, we used to go street preaching and sing that song. It was embarrassing. But if you've never given your life to Christ, you're on the bench. You're missing this fight. And every decision is counting, for better or for worse. And you have this opportunity even today where it says, whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Guys, it's time to start hitting the bullseye that God put there. He's the one we're accountable to. He's the one we're going to answer to. It's not about being a nice guy, a nice girl. It's about being holy. And we cannot do that without him. No matter how awesome you are, no matter how hard you try, you can't do it without him. Give him your heart by calling on his name, asking for forgiveness. He is faithful and just to forgive you and cleanse you of all unrighteousness. Saul never recovered, by the way. That story doesn't end well, but yours can. Amen? Amen. Good stuff. Every decision matters. Every decision matters. Let's pray.